Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, or whatever it is that you're tuning in to watch. You're watching Naked Tax Talk, babies. I'm Jonathan Bangle here, the host, where we bear down to the naked truth about who we are in our personal lives, our business lives, and of course, our monetary lives. Because what I know to be true is that when we improve upon the self, the business, which is a reflection of who you are, also improves. And the money, honeys, is a reflection of your business and who you are. And of course, that only gets bigger and better. And when you work with a certified tax coach and a planner and an agent like myself, we see the taxes go down. I'm coming to you live actually from my backyard. I'm using my cheesy laptop, so I do apologize for the video being a little bit kind of cattywampus today, but that's okay though. That's part of being here authentically, fully in vision with you. So today's guest, his name is Leo York, and he is from Kentucky, and he's going to talk to us today about copywriting. And if you're a business owner, this is actually an area of business that one must become familiar with so as to attract the right types of clients that come to do business with you. So without much further ado, I'd like to take myself out first. I'd like to welcome Leo to Naked Tax Talk. Welcome, Leo.
Hey, Jonathan, thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. So I'm really excited that you're here because I think what you work on, which is copywriting, and I know you do more, I think it's so fundamentally important for entrepreneurs and even tax professionals to really understand this one area of, would you say, marketing or advertising, which is
It's
copywriting.
it's it's in the cusp, yeah, absolutely.
So if you would do us a big favor and tell us who you are and what you're all about, and how the heck did you become a copyright specialist?
Sure, absolutely. Well, I'm Leo, and I'm from Kentucky, and I grew up on a cattle farm.
Oh,
And growing up on a cattle farm, you sort of have to get good at a lot of things quickly, because it's not just a question of moving cows from A to B. You have, when things break, you have to fix it on the fly. So you just have to become very versatile. And from an early age, I really enjoyed writing. And some of the most iconic classes I took when I went to college later, University of Kentucky, were writing classes. And started writing for just magazines and periodicals from there on out. And one day it was during the 2008, 2010, give or take, economic crisis and all that.
yep.
And so you basically had to have a master's degree to become a dishwasher that year. and and I'm already writing for all these different magazines and periodicals. And I come across this book by another Leo Burnett, who's the king of copy. And I was reading and I thought, oh my God, you can do this. I hadn't thought about it. I hadn't realized that, every ad I'd ever seen started off as something somebody imagined and wrote down. So the idea for that was just a very organic jump from writing articles to writing marketing content.
That's kind of interesting. Now, so you said you grew up on a cattle farm,
Mm-hmm.
and what did you learn? I mean, does cattle farming translate somehow into copywriting?
There are some definite components. And by that, I mean, farming is a tedious and slow process, but it requires a lot of observation. You have to become extremely, extremely good at noticing things. Because if you don't notice something one day, like say a slightly big bulge at the very bottom, right at the base of the hoof of a cow, well, the next day it might be dead. So you have to get really good at noticing things and observing things. And that's what copy starts out as. If you can't observe and notice what needs to be noticed, what's often not noticed by the business owner, then you can't really craft good copy.
Oh, you just put total chills on me. It's not even cold. I'm here in sunny Phoenix, Arizona today with a high of 80 degrees. And I was mentioning this in the back room. I've been loving the heat as I'm getting older. But you brought chills to me because you brought up something so fundamentally important in even our own human existence. And that is the art of, I'd say, the art of observation. And I loved how you said in business, it's about observing what's happening either around us with our clients or with us, and then transforming that into something. So how do we, when you think about people who are like real sporadic, like I totally am ADD, like so like, do you have any practices that you might share with a client and say, hey, listen, so maybe step one is to slow down and begin the observation process? Do you have something like that you kind of help out?
Absolutely. A huge part of it. It's kind of, it's funny in Naked Text Talk. People have the idea of shower thoughts, and they wonder, why am I so good at coming up with things in the shower? But there's a reason why we're good at coming up with things in the shower. It's because you've washed yourself in the exact same order that you did when you were taught how when you were probably like 3. So that's one. And there's white noise in the shower. So you're not thinking about anything. And that's my biggest advice. Is a lot of times the reason why so many business owners struggle with finding the right observational points is because they're constantly thinking about their business. And one of the best things to do is make an outline of your business goals, think about the kind of audience you want to reach, and then force yourself not to think about it. Go for a walk, do something else, and let the subconscious part of your mind, the part of your mind that's creative, let it just bubble up without putting, a spotlight on
Again, you're giving me like mental orgasms,
it.
Leo, right now. I want to say, like, you got right to the foreplay, which I love. So, like, basically, you're nailing it. You're so right. In the shower, that's where that's so funny because I say this is where all great thoughts come from, is in the shower. And you're absolutely right. I'm in there showering and I start thinking about, my talk or how I'm going to, hold myself up, whatever, blah, blah, blah. So basically what you're saying is, and I think I'm going to say this with you, go get waterproof paper and pen
There
and
we
have
go.
that hanging in your shower. And then when you get those creative ideas, write them down.
That's a great idea. No joke.
And it's interesting because, like, Naked Tax Talk, even though it was born by accident as an unplanned pregnancy back in July of 19, I have to believe that subconsciously a lot of it came from being in the shower. And I remember being in the shower, taking a shower, and thinking to myself, like, man, being naked is kind of like an IRS agent, like a revenue agent coming in and asking to audit your books. It's like having them like undress you
It's a very
when you don't want
vulnerable
them to
thing.
undress you.
Yeah.
Yes. So I think subconsciously I already began the process of thinking my show. So I like that. So slowing down. So what are some things that when you work with people who again are looking, because let's be real, some of us are really great copywriters. Some of us are like, what the hell are you talking about? How do you walk someone through this process? Do you have I have an introductory type service, or do I have something that's like a do it for you?
What I always offer to a client first thing, and sometimes this is really all they need, is a free consultation, where we talk for 30 minutes, 45 minutes, maybe even an hour, and just sort of go over what the nature of their business is, what their goals are, what their concerns are, who their main market is. And that one brief conversation, sometimes half an hour, tells me a lot. Not just what they actively tell me, but the things that they withhold. And it's a process, because usually at the beginning of that conversation, I figure out what they want, or more accurately, what they think they want. And
They think they want, yes.
exactly. And from there, I pare it down to what they actually want. And then from there, I pare it down to what they actually need.
Mm.
And the real challenge is convincing them what they need rather than what they think they want. And that can sometimes be difficult, especially with startups and entrepreneurs for whom marketing is sort of a dirty word to a lot of them, even though
Yes.
it's really just visibility. We live in a world where,
Yes.
yeah, exactly.
Yes. Oh, sorry.
Huh?
Uh, I should disclose this. I'm in my backyard and I do butt up against a major boulevard here, so we're getting a lot of feedback. But you're absolutely right. I mean, it's so true that and it's funny, when I first started in this world of speaking and consultation and stuff like that, I remember my own coaches saying, the consumer believes that they think they know what they want, but they don't really know what they need. And so it's up to us to help point that out, right? To pull that out. And
Absolutely.
I struggled with that personally for like a year. But you know what I did though? And you just talked about this. I started to observe, like legit, listening to what my clients were saying, or the incoming client was saying. And one of my coaches, and former coaches, I should say, his name is Iman. He says you have 8 golden questions that you have to ask the prospective client for marketing purposes. But what I did is I flipped the script and I turned them into my sales conversation questions. And so I began to build my own copy research, right?
Yeah.
And then from there, I was able to look at all of their answers because I asked the same questions. When it comes to taxes, what frustrates you? When it comes to paying taxes, what's your biggest fear? So I asked all these questions and I kept on seeing all these similar answers.
Hmm.
And then I said, what's the overall word or words that sums all of that up? And one day I'm in the shower, great thinking comes there. And I realized that the answer was the darkness.
That's an excellent observation. Yeah, the unknown.
The unknown. It's the number one thing every taxpayer deals with, the
Mm-hmm.
unknown. And copyright, or those that want to engage in marketing, same thing, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep, they've not got their feet wet, and it's new territory.
Yeah, absolutely. So do you specialize in working with certain industries, or do you kind of have do you have a preferred market, I guess I should ask?
Absolutely. Yeah, I work with, I'm not picky about the size of the business, and I'm not averse to working with lots of industries, but my absolute favorite is food and bev, and my real forte is commercial scripts, screenplays that are translated into commercials. And the reason for that also goes back to the agriculture background. Love animals, have always observed animals my entire life, almost encyclopedic knowledge of animals, not to boast. And my background's in biology. And so I actually cater to the more reptile and mammalian brain when I write copy. Because, a lot of our decision making, we tend to think of it as what I identify as me, made this decision. I wanted RC Cola, so I got RC Cola. When really that decision was probably made more by like the limbic brain mammalian or the brainstem reptilian. And that goes especially with food and bev. Because if you think about it, when you make decisions for food, you're not using the rational part of your brain. If you were, everybody in America would be perfect BMI and healthy as horses. But we don't. We make our decisions with the same part of our mind that we share in common with snakes and on a good day with monkeys. So, yeah.
Wow. I mean, that does make sense. I mean, it does make sense when it comes to the food and the beverage. By the way, I'm going to introduce you to my clients. So shout out to you, Emily and Bruce, the owners of the Bearded Butcher here in town. It's a food
Hey,
truck. So
good
I will
deal.
definitely be sharing this episode with them for shizzle. But
Wonderful.
you make an interesting comment about the mind, right? That reptilian mind at its base, right? And you're so right. It's like we know things aren't good for us, and yet we consume it because it's food.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, this is how
Wow.
primitive it is. This is something that grocery stores do. You probably notice you go in the grocery store, the produce has moisture on it. It's got beads of what appears to be dew. Well, that's because before we ever got civilized, we would harvest wild fruits in the morning because that was when a predator was less likely to get us. The morning hours, the early morning hours. So even though that's sprayed artificially and it's actually, more likely to carry a disease because of that spray, it appeals to us. It immediately evokes something in the more primitive recesses of our mind that I'm safe, I'm comfortable, time to buy an apple. So yeah.
Wow. So how do you translate that? Because that's definitely copywriting on their part.
Mhm.
How do we translate this to, for example, like I have my peers watch this show, other accountants and tax guys and women and stuff like that. What would be like, could you be willing to share a tip and just the tip of like how maybe the primitive mind works in terms of like when it comes to taxes?
Oh, well, one of the biggest and most primitive responses we have, our chief instinct is fear. And fear is a much stronger response than any other emotion, really, because it makes sense. We're geared to have a negative response faster and stronger than a positive one. Think about it in terms of an animal. If an animal, like say a rabbit, if they had equal associations between gravitating towards food and running away from a predator, that rabbit's not going to live very long because it's going to prioritize cabbage at the same level as getting away from a fox.
Mm.
And so when we think about taxes, the first thing we need to consider is that are the decisions I'm making, are they based on a knee-jerk response to fear, in which case, given that taxes are a very complicated matter, I need to manage that fear, do away with it to some degree or another, and start using the more rational part of my mind to deal with it. Because it's one of those instances where you're definitely going to want to use your higher cognitive self over any kind of primitive response. Because let's face facts, snakes can't do taxes.
No. No, that was great. Thank you
Oh,
for
thank
sharing
you.
that. It's true. Like, again, for my fellow colleagues out there, I mean, you're absolutely right. It's about that fear. And that's what I kept hearing back from every single sales call I was having. The fear, the fear, the fear. And the common ones were the fear of being caught, the fear of overpaying taxes, fear of paying taxes, and then not knowing what they could deduct on their taxes. These were big, huge commonality. And so that's why I said I drilled it down and distilled it to the darkness of taxation. And then, as you know, we then say, okay, but what's the benefit now? Right? What's the thing? What's the outcome?
What's the cabbage? Yeah.
What's the cabbage? I love that. And so my cabbage is what I kept saying was, oh, financial happiness. Because I kept realizing that the opposite of fear is happiness. I mean, it makes
Absolutely.
sense.
Yeah.
And so I really appreciate that, what you shared. I mean, that is like brilliant.
Thanks.
So that
Good
is
deal.
so awesome. So now, what is so we do copywriting, and from copywriting, what goes? Because I think, like, in the world of, like, for example, accounting, right, or tax, people think, oh, I got to see my tax guy and I got to add up my numbers and then I'll give him something at the end of the year, right? But there's a whole bunch more that goes on behind the scenes. So can you take us through the journey of, like, how copywriting is kind of like the base, but where does it go? Where does the outcome come from that?
The outcome.
Like, like, do we start with a lead? I mean, well, I guess you could say a lead magnet, but
Oh,
where do we
gotcha.
end up at?
I see. Yeah, usually it starts with word of mouth and networking events and reaching out to people. And at the end, provided I do a good job, which I thankfully do,
Yeah,
generally
yeah.
speaking, it usually ends with a finished product that's ready to showcase either to a videographer, if it's a script, or a graphic designer, if it's, say, direct mail, for example. And I
Oh,
think
okay.
that's probably the most fun thing about it for me. I'm not a very artistic person. I can't even draw a stick figure. And so for me
Mine either. Don't
to
worry.
for me to write something out and then have it turned by other people with talents that I don't have into something that's aesthetic, a video or a direct mail piece or what have you, it's always really wonderful to see the finished product, because it's like, yeah, I wrote it, but I didn't know what it was going to look like until I saw it.
That is so cool. It's almost like kind of being, like you said it earlier too, though, but it's kind of like being a script writer,
Yeah.
where, like, you legit are writing the story,
Mhm.
and then you see it being produced, directed, and then you see this final movie or show, and it's really the writers who are really responsible
Yeah,
for, in a
absolutely.
way, setting that foundation. So really, what you are is kind of like the foundation rock star.
It's funny. I thought I would sound cocky if I said that, but I like to think of it as laying the foundation for something. So
I
that's
like that.
terrific.
Own that, Leo. Own it. Own it.
Good deal.
I'm gonna tell you right. Okay, hold on. Teachable moment. Okay, so this is what I've learned. This is what I've learned over time. Um, I'm very gregarious. I know that. I'm very well. I'm not shy, right? I throw everything out there.
Good deal.
And what I have learned, it's taken me a couple years, honestly, to let my hair down and to really just be me at all times. And, like, I came up with the phrase, right? Business prophet tax coach extraordinaire. And I was so shy about saying that because I'd come up with it and I wrote it down and everything. But I was like, "Ooh, is this going to be too much?" Right? Or if I say, "Yes, I know I'm a genius. I know I'm brilliant. I know I'm amazing. I'm a great lay." Like, when I say all those things, right? Like, I found that when I finally just owned it, nobody could strip away my power. Nobody could take away who I was. And so I think it's interesting because I have a class called Rapid Tax Savings Formula. And I teach in class 1 the profit mindset. And it starts with what I call the root of all evil. And what I call this root of all evil is actually the shame and the judgment of others placed upon us way before we're even born. And so it
Mm.
starts in the mother's womb. So they ask the mother, like my mother, for example, or your mother, first of all, is it a boy or a girl? Right? That's the
Right.
first question. So we're going to identify a gender. And then the second thing, in my mother's case, they go, who's the daddy? Right?
Oh, I
So
see.
in my dad's case, my dad was having an affair with my mother for 14 years. So that's my dad, right? So that's
Right.
like, who's the dad? Right? So this judgment begins before we're
Wow.
born.
Right.
And then we're born, we come out of the womb, they go boy, right? This first thing is gender, boy, girl. And then next thing you know, all these expectations about what we should become, right? We should get married, we
Mm.
should have kids, we should be thin, we should have a clean face or a bearded face, or all this shouldas and couldas and wouldas all overing us, right? And what I figured out is that's the root that just places on us. And so it dampens our light of who we are. It takes away our being.
Mm.
And so I discovered that I was born gay. I was born to a single mother with no income really. Like I was born into extreme poverty against all odds, right? And I'm pretty brown, so I do get discriminated against, believe it or not, for being brown.
Sure.
And so I know what all that feels like. And so I had to overcome all of that and be
Right.
like, no, motherfuckers, I'm gay, I'm queer, I'm this, I'm that, and just own it. And so I had to shred away those judgments and shred
Mm.
away, those sense of being of what others thought of me.
Right.
And what I've discovered is that when I let all that go in my business, this is the connection to business.
Absolutely.
Let me tell you, Leo, I became a multi six-figure earner with multiple businesses
Awesome.
by believing in who I was and
Mm.
not being afraid to own my star qualities.
That is terrific. Thank you
So,
so
Leo,
much for sharing that.
I want you to own who you are
All right.
and never be afraid to
I'm the
proclaim.
foundation.
Yes. Hell double yes for that big F2, mind you. I'm the foundation.
Mm.
I love that, Leo, because honestly, you've been here. Let's be real. I met you at a networking event
Mhm.
and we had to be on each other's shows, just how it works.
Yep.
And like, you've been on my show for 22 minutes. Like, I'm in love with you. Like, what you said rings so true. Everything you mentioned rings so true
Thank you.
that it's like, wow. So, yes, brother, thank you for being on my show, but also thank you for being you. And let's continue to let that light shine bright and let the
Awesome.
world know who you are.
Good deal. Yeah.
So I promise you, people may not jive with you, but there's a whole bunch more behind them that want to jive and basically dance to the beat of your drum.
Hmm. Thank you.
So I'll share that with you. So we're getting to the segment where we're going to ask me a tax question, and I apologize, I kind of stole a little bit of time from you. But Leo, I know you've got at least two questions, but I know you had a really important question. Yeah, actually, both of them are fairly important. But what are your tax questions, and how can I answer that for you today?
Sure. One thing I've given a lot of thought to, largely from the agricultural background, because let's face fact, every family farm is a family business. And, you know, even though it's never been a chief issue, gift tax, I've always wondered, it's just nagged at me and I've never thought to ask anyone. I've always wondered, what's the difference between having a child who is an employee, if you run a business, or a child who's receiving a gift? If they're on a payroll, what's to stop someone from just calling a gift a bonus or vice versa?
Ooh, this is a great question, actually. Like, this is like legit,
Hmm.
fully loaded. I love it question.
Oh, good deal. It's
By
a
the way,
brain buster for me. So,
hopefully I can explain it to you. And just for the record, I got to do my shameless plugs. But at the end of the day, I do cover this in detail in my course, Rapid Tax Savings Formula, which is starting April 30th. Mark your calendars. We're going to answer that question. Difference between a gift versus putting somebody on payroll, which, by the way, is actually a common strategy that a lot of taxpayers leave off the table. So I'm glad you brought that up. But
oh,
before we do, I forgot to do this and I apologize. But if you want to talk to Leo York and you want him to help you out with your copying, this guy's a genius. I can tell already. Hello, he gave us some freaking ass amazing tips already. got to visit him at his LinkedIn profile, www.linkedin.com. But find him, Leo York. Check him out. I mean, already this guy's like, hello. And of course, you got to check out his 13th Floor Podcast.com. Real fast though, Leo, tell us what the 13th Floor Podcast is about.
Sure. And it's unfortunate for me. It's the only thing that I'm known by my given name as. I've gone by my middle name my whole life as Leo, but I'm James on that 13th floor just because I met my co-hosts in college, and that was the one class, best class I ever took, but it's the one class where I got introduced by another person. And of course, they introduced me by what was on the syllabus. So they've called me James for 10 years now, and that's a habit that's never going to get broke. So I'm James on the 13th floor. But we talk about conspiracy theories. We talk about paranormal things, UFOs. The recent episode that just dropped, it's, whether Elvis is alive or not. So things like that. And it's always with a comical slant. So
I love it.
Thanks.
I don't want to take my show and talk about that because, oh my gosh, because I gotta come be on your show now because I've got multiple. Actually, okay, real fast. I'll give you a 30-second commercial. I was 12 or 13. I was living in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and my brother and I and my really good friend Steven at the time both saw a UFO during the day, literally using a blue light and scanning the buildings.
Whoa. Yeah, New Mexico is a hot spot. So,
But dude, I'm telling you. So we totally saw one. And then as far as paranormal is concerned, I have definitely been, I'm sensitive to spirits. But I've definitely been haunted by a really nasty one. I have one that lives here in the house right now. I figured out it's got to be the energy feels like it's an older woman that was a chain smoker. So we know she's in the house, and we know she's around because she likes to smoke when she's around us. And then I have to often remind her and be like, "Can you please turn out your cigarettes? Like, we're not real smokers." In fact, I was filming this show, Naked Tax Talk, in February 2020 when COVID had us all go home. And she was sitting next to me, and I actually brought that up in a live cast.
Whoa.
And I was like, I don't know who you are, but can you please turn out your cigarette? So it was on your show.
Creepy.
We're going to talk about this story.
Absolutely.
You want to tune in to him and I? Come tune into our show. But let's get back to your tax question. Children, hire them, which by the way is a classic strategy that a lot of people leave off, which I cover in my course, Rapid Tax Savings Formula. And then you said, and what's the difference between a gift, right? What prohibits me or what may not prohibit me from gifting to my children? So let's talk first about what an employee is. So an employee, by definition, is somebody that you actually control. So only in business, baby, can I be the dominant? Can we play dominatrix and I'm the master, or I am the mistress, right? Depending on our roles, right? And the employee is kind of like my submissive, right? It's my sub. And so it's all about control. And in fact, the IRS has 26 points of control to determine if somebody is considered an employee of your business. So, for example, the classic is we hire subcontractors, right? But the moment we tell them they have to show up at a certain time, the moment we tell them how much we're going to pay them, the moment we tell them how to do their job or link their pay to the job, or we provide all the tools and equipment in place to do the job, right? The moment we do that, they're actually an employee of ours and not a contractor because we're controlling them. So that's the first thing. As an employee is somebody that you ultimately control to fulfill a job function for you. So that's key. So children, by definition, are typically not employees right off the bat. But when it comes to children and working in your business, depending on the entity structure, which I talk about in Rapid Tax Savings Formula in detail, depending on that entity structure, it's going to determine basically the tax benefit to hiring our children in our business. So rule of thumb, children, and again, I know you come from agricultural background. I have to tell you right now, I am not an agricultural business specialist.
No worries.
I'm a big city boy, so that's my specialty. But the rules still kind of apply in the same way, I would imagine. And that is that in the city life, I guess we'll go there first, we hire our children the earliest we can kind of really get away with it, like logistically, is 7 years old. That's like the earliest, the youngest age they can be, up to a certain point. And so when this happens, depending on the entity structure, I might be exempt from paying FICA tax, employee Medicare and Social Security tax on the child. So depending on the entity structure. So that's the first thing that determines this. So children are put onto payroll. Now you're happily paying them, right? We're following federal rules and state rules, right? We're paying them minimum wage at a minimum. We have employee handbooks they have to sign. They're clocking in, clocking out. They're filling out forms and documents and all kinds of fun stuff, right? This is what the children are doing when we hire them. And they're legitimately on payroll, being paid by the hour, right? And we're paying them. So, first of all, the business owner gets a deduction for the wages. Now, again, depending on the entity structure, they may also be able to deduct the FICA tax as well.
I see.
So, again, it's going to depend on that entity. So, that's a benefit to the owner, right? So, let's owner, mom, and dad. By the way, do you have kids?
No.
Okay, if you have
Someday.
kids, yes, if you have kids and the day you have kids, essentially, we're going to hire them, we're going to pay them minimum wage, and they're going to do a job function for us. Okay, sorry, I lost my train of thought because I was kind of okay. That's all dandy, totally legal, up to par. A gift, on the other hand, is something that we give away to someone or something, or a business, charity, children, whatever, right? And we technically call this a gift because we expect nothing in return. And this is true as well in our personal lives, right? When we say, okay, Leo, here, I'll give you something from the kindness of my heart. Here, have an apple pie. I don't expect you to throw it up and give it back to me, right? Or I don't expect you to pay me for it. So this is true about gifting. No matter how you cut the cookie, it's gifting. In business, I could say to an employee, I'll gift you some money. But the problem with this is that gifts, generally speaking, are non-deductible, meaning I cannot reduce my taxes, my taxable income by those gifts technically, right, off my income from my business. So if we do give gifts, which people do, so for example, let's say I sent you a thank you card, right? And I bought you a really expensive bottle of wine and it was $100, all right? If I send this wine to you with the gift card, the only amount I can deduct on my tax return for that gift is $25 max per client once per year. So this is in a business setting, right? So again, if I have a child who's working for me and they're my employee and I gift them something, depending on circumstances, we might have limitations that are impacting us. Now, if it's a bonus, like I mentioned earlier in your question, if it's a bonus, that's a whole different ballgame. That falls under the rules of wages. And so it would be subjected to the same ordinary income tax, FICA tax, state tax, etc. Now, to complicate things even more, technically speaking, every person in the United States that's an adult, 18 or over, has what we call a gift allotment. That the government basically says if you gift money or equivalents, so it could be buildings, companies, cars, whatever, we gift that out. I believe for 2021, the gift limitations are $15,000 per person, basically. So I being the donee, donee. I always get confused by these two things. Yeah, if I being the donor and I give it out right to you, I go, Leo, you're my best friend. You're like, we're besties. And I want to gift you $16,000. And you're like, hell double yeah. So I cut you a check for 16 G's, right?
Right.
I give this to you, $16,000. It's tax-free to you, right? The recipient, because oh, thank you so much, right?
Right.
but the person who issues it has to file a gift tax return. Believe it or not, like they legit have to file a tax return. And they're going to say, I gave Leo $16,000, of which the $15,000 is tax-free to both of
Right.
us. And then I'm going to pay taxes on that $1,000 for gifting it to him. Or I may make an election and say, don't have me pay the tax. Have Leo pay the tax.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting. Wow.
So I oversimplified this. I apologize to my trust and estate friends out there, but that's kind of the gist.
Interesting.
So
Thank
with
you.
children, we pay them a wage, and we don't gift them. In fact, I call gifting a bad word because it is limited. And so instead, we find other creative ways in which we show our appreciation to those that work for us.
I see.
And so there are ways. So for example, I hire my children. Again, limitations might apply, but essentially the idea is, let's say, for example, let's use teenage children. It's better to talk about teenagers, a little bit easier. So let's say they're like 16, 17, and 18 18 is an adult. So they're like 16 and 17. Okay, and the 18-year-old. And you are a copywriter like you, and you are putting together an event. And their job function is to help you set up your stage and take down your stage and register people, right? They are your workforce. And you're like, you know what, guys? You guys worked so hard for me today. I want to buy everybody here that worked for me pizza. The kids go crazy. Pizza! Right? So you go and you order 20 boxes of pepperoni pizza and you have it delivered. The business is going to be allowed to deduct that because it benefited your employees for doing a service, basically, and you kind of forced them to work through what would be a normal break or whatever the case may be. So this is what we do. So we often see, in fact, I'm getting ready to host a party here at my house in my backyard. I'm calling it the V party for those that are vaccinated. The part of the V team. And I'm essentially going to invite people here, primarily my clients first, right? Same concept. I'm going to have my food catered. I'm going to have maybe a professional DJ. I'm going to have this whole backyard set up, right? And my companies are going to pay for all of that because it's for the benefit of basically having my clients over.
I see.
Does that make sense?
It does. Thank you.
So did I help with the kid question?
Absolutely. That makes a lot more sense now.
Perfect. And personally for you and for others, again, I got cheap plug. You got to come check out Rapid Tax Savings Formula. And I just realized I don't have a banner for it. But quite honestly, you can just go to jonathanbangle.com. That is my other company, my third company, jonathanbangle.com. You can get the details there for Rapid. So you had another question, and we do have time. So what was your other question?
Good deal. Yeah, this one's a little more outlandish, but I was just curious.
Yeah.
You know, being a self-employed and being a writer, all my home office stuff that's, you know, deductible. And I got to thinking about it. What's the weirdest thing personally that you have seen that someone has deducted for, say, a home office or home business that worked? Like the IRS was like, absolutely, that's fine.
I love what you said. Okay, so we got to go back to the basics.
Okay.
So back to the basics will be found on the ABCs of Deductions, an entrepreneur's guide to tax write-offs, a #1 bestseller on Amazon. Go check it out. But we had to go back to the basics. And so in my book, I talk about what is a deduction. So a deduction must be ordinary and necessary. These are the two things in order for one to have a deduction. And so we go into details again in Rapid Tax Savings about those two rules. But essentially, in essence, is this. In order for something to classify as a deduction, it must be ordinary, as in it's something I'm always doing because it's what I do in my profession, right, and what I offer as a product or a service. And it's got to be necessary. Without it, I don't make any money. And if you know, both you and I, this isn't a sales conversation. This isn't a copywriting conversation. This is about the money, honey. And so it's about making money, and more importantly, a profit. And so Uncle Sam's like, that's all I care about, really, at the end of the day, is the profit and you making money, right? So, oh shoot, I just lost my train of thought. Back to the question at hand. Sorry, what was the question
Whether
is?
it's obvious and
Oh yeah,
necessary with regard
obvious and
to making
necessary, and
money.
if I've missed anything crazy. Yes, okay. So, in a home office deduction for a lot of solopreneurs or single member LLC filers who file a Schedule C on a 1040, that's just the legalese chat I had to throw out there. So, those are the forms.
Right.
Under that, you're entitled to this deduction, home office deduction. And so, we add up the total square footage of your home divided by the square footage of the office space, and that gives us the percentage. So, inside of that, as you know, we can deduct our mortgage interest, real estate taxes, homeowners insurance, repairs and maintenance, the HOA fees, and all kinds of other little things it takes to operate our house. The reason for that is because Uncle Sam realized that if I'm going to come to your house, Leo, and it looks like shit, my likelihood of doing business with you is probably going to tumble, right? Because image is everything.
Right.
Whereas if I pay for the landscapers and the pool guys and the pool women's or whatever, or I pay for, the cleaning ladies and guys, and I do all of those home services to keep my house amazing, all for the benefit of continuing to make money and a profit, Uncle Sam's going to say, yep, put that down. We're going to limit it, of course, to your office space. Boom, bada bang. Now, what constitutes a home office? Well, it's got to be exclusively used for the production of income, right? So theoretically, if you were to give me a tour of your home office right now, we should not see beds and dresser drawers or anything that looks like a bedroom, right? It should look like an office. And so that's the first thing. It's got to be an office. So Uncle Sam doesn't say it has to be a bedroom. He doesn't say it has to have 4 walls. He doesn't say any of that. He just says a place that is dedicated for your business. So, I personally have not really seen anything too crazy, other than, and this is a tip, and most people don't watch the show this long, so here it goes, is this. So when it comes to the home office deduction, if you are a S Corp or a C Corp, right, or a partnership, you are technically not entitled to that home office deduction that you would otherwise be entitled to as the other filers, right? Schedule C, 1040, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
So instead, Uncle Sam has a very specialized rule that essentially says to us, we can charge rent to our companies. Now, of course, there's a whole bunch of rules, too, that go into that, right?
Sure.
And depending on how often and how frequently you rent your office to your company, you may or may not have to disclose the income.
Wow.
And you still get to take it as a deduction. Limitations do apply. So, but that's like the gist of it. Like, that's like the sweet mark.
That is wild.
So here's an idea. So let's say, Leo, okay, I'm going to pick on you a little bit. So you said you come from working in the farms, right? And you said that one of your functions is to be observant. And as a copywriter, right? It's observing the way things work. And let's say, for example, you were going to do some copywriting for the farmers, for their crops. All right. And you're like, man, I got to constantly be observing how corn grows. Right? So you might, never mind. I'm not going to use that. That'll confuse people out there listening to this. Instead, maybe you set up like a little, like you actually build a structure that's like slightly over the corn. And then you go into it, and then you put your binoculars on and you observe the corn growing and the sunsets and I don't know what else, right? In order to create awesome content, right, for copywriting. So theoretically, if you were to put your computer in there and you were to have your printer in there and it becomes another office space, that could constitute as an office.
Interesting.
It's dedicated for the purpose of your business.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely. No, I'm really glad I asked that question because I halfway didn't, and I'm really glad I did now. So that's really cool.
Yes. No such thing as a stupid question. I remember learning this when I was in school, right? No such
Right.
thing. Yeah, no, because I mean, that's like that's way far like out of left field. But the average taxpayer that's a solopreneur, etc., they typically are renting or they're using a bedroom in their home office, or they might take a den, or like I'm about to do this in a couple of years. Is I'm going to take my garage and I'm going to convert it into an office.
Ah, good deal.
Right. So Uncle Sam's all about that. He's like, absolutely, JB. Put some walls up, put a door in, put some windows in, right? Make it into a legit office space. And as a result, I'm gonna let you depreciate the shit out of that for a little while and recuperate that. And then because I'm putting money in my backyard, I'll give you a little tour right now. Might as well. What the hell? And so I'll show you my backyard. I'm working on it. It's a work in progress. But this is my current backyard right now. So this is my view. So you can see I put some plants over there on the wall. I got a gazebo thingy over there that we're gonna hold on a second. Then we're gonna have tables set up. That's a functioning whatchamacallit,
Trellis?
grill thingy with tables. I don't know what else.
Oh, I thought you were
We
pointing
have a
at the trellis.
trellis we just built here for cantaloupe and some flowers and I think loofah. And then like in here where I'm at, this is like my little sanctuary. So I've got like some, a massage table, so I put some money into my house this year. And as a result of doing this, had I been renting from myself, I would have been able to recoup some of this by deducting some of this on my tax return.
Cool. That is flipping cool.
Limitations do apply. But I mean, so that's kind of like the concept. So when you think about your home office, one really should consider all the various things that goes into maintaining that home. And like I said, Uncle Sam's not a big amount. I mean, average is about 13%, 10%. But imagine though, if you spent if we track our numbers, which is what I do for my own family and for my businesses. And personally, for our household to enjoy my lifestyle, on average, it's about $6,000 a month is what it takes to have this middle-class American life, if that's what you want to call it. And if you think about that, 6 times 10 is 60,000. 6 times 12 is what, 72,000, right? So imagine now, I'm oversimplifying this, but imagine if those were all of my household costs here to maintain this house, right? And I had a dedicated office space and it came out to 10%. In theory, I could possibly have a $7,200 home office deduction.
Right. Nice. Oh, good
So
deal.
again, limitations do apply. But I mean, that's the concept.
Right.
Of the home office deduction.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
You're more than welcome. So before we go, once again, if you've been watching this, you tuned in late, or you'd like to say hello to us, please check out, first of all, Leo's, his name goes by James, he says early on the show, 13thfloorpodcast.com, where we talk about the paranormal, and UFOs, and all the other conspiracy stuff that goes on in the world. You can check him out there. And of course, if you just want to talk to him and figure out how he can help possibly you with your copywriting, check him out, linkedin.com, Leo York. And Leo, thank you so much for being a guest.
Thanks
and before we part, let's circle back to copywriting and the purpose of copywriting. Are there any last words of wisdom you'd like to drop to our viewers today?
Sure. The most important thing to consider in marketing is visibility. Copy shouldn't be entertaining or creative, even though it can be. First and foremost, it should sell. So if you want something that sells, that's what you should look for in copy.
I'm going to write that shit down. Copy should sell. And this is by Leo York. Awesome. Now, out of curiosity, Leo, I forgot to ask you this question. I should have asked you earlier, but do you do like a copy analysis to look at people's copy material if they have copy material?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Fantastic.
In fact, I should take a leaf out of your book. I should start calling it a copy audit.
I mean, hello. Yeah, I mean, you totally could call it a copy audit. I think that would be great. Yeah, yeah, my permission too. But definitely. Oh, Angel Johnstone. She is one of my clients, student of mine as well.
Yeah.
Rapid
Hi,
text savings
Angel.
formula. She's going to start up. So, yep, you'll get the replay. We talked about some juicy stuff first. So what? But nonetheless, Leo, thank you so much for being a guest here. And like
Thanks
you
for having
said,
me.
copy. I love what you said, brother. Thank you.
Thank
Copy
you.
should be about making money. I like
Hmm.
that because when we sell our services and our products, it's about making money. So with
Absolutely.
that, I'm Jonathan Bangle here. And next week, tune in while I interview somebody. I can't remember who it is, but all I can tell you is like RuPaul always says, babies, if you can't love yourself, who in the hell you're going to love? And more importantly, remember when it comes to entrepreneurship, it is con mucho, mucho, mucho dinero. Until next week, I'm Jonathan Bangle. By the way, I might be doing surprise live podcasting here on my trip to New Mexico and
Hey,
back to
good
visit
deal.
my father, who I've not seen in over 2 decades. So
Wow.
stay tuned. Until then, toodles noodles.